Alana, it is so good to see you again. We're happy to have you back so quickly as a follow-up to our previous episode. So thanks so much for coming on again.
Thrilled to be here.
Well, we were really excited when you guys reached back out to us and said that you had done this follow-up because one of the more intriguing, I think, results from the survey that you guys do every year that we discussed the last time that we talked was that more and more people are looking for financial products by using large language models, things like ChatGPT, Gemini, things like that, where they're going in and saying, hey, what's the best credit card? A practice that they used to do mostly on things like Google and Bing. So tell me a little bit about what led you guys to want to dig into that more, because you would think that that would definitely impact affiliate marketing as an industry as a whole pretty importantly. So what made you guys dig deeper on that?
Well, that was a big motivator. I think, as with anything, as digital marketing evolves, as consumer behavior evolves, it's so important that we're kind of keeping a pulse on what's going on and what are the changes and how can we make sure we're supporting our partners and our clients and the publishers as best we can to make sure that really everybody still wins. And so to your point, we've seen the research, more than 50% of Americans have indicated that they're using ChatGPT for financial recommendations. And I'd say ChatGPT of all of you referenced LLMs. I think that's probably the most used. And then we have Gemini, we have Perplexity, we have Claude. There's lots of these different kind of platforms that are used for different purposes. And I think we're kind of looking at ChatGPT as the dominant one. But I'd say Gemini is probably the next in Perplexity. But really, consumers are using these platforms because they're doing very specific searches to find financial recommendations that are right for them and to help shortcut their research. So similar to the way affiliates are playing a role in, general organic search, where the websites are helping to curate a bunch of information about financial products, now the LLMs are serving that purpose. And what's really interesting about the LLMs is, they don't produce their own content. They're very dependent on seeing what else is out there in market and referencing good quality, credible sources, similar to the way Google surfaces, high intent, high quality, high credibility websites. The LLMs behave the same way. And what our hypothesis and what we were seeing more and more is affiliate content is actually heavily influencing the prompt responses and what's showing up in the responses. So long story short, when we looked at, all of these kind of indicators, we said, let's roll up our sleeves, do our own research, and really start to look at what are we finding, and are these hypotheses that we have about the role affiliates and these big publishers are playing, is it true? Are they influencing the way financial institutions are showing up in prompt responses for things like top high yield savings accounts for me, or what are the best rewards credit cards I should be thinking about if I spend on these categories? And, in actual fact, we wanted to prove out that affiliates do play a role and wanted to know to what extent, and were there differences in the different platforms, differences based on, geographic, time of day. So we did very kind of controlled tests and set up a hypothesis. We chose to focus heavily on high yield savings as a category and credit cards as a category. And we tested about 30 prompts per category across different times of day and different geos. And then we basically curated the results into the report that we just put out.
Interesting, because I think it might shock some people to think, wow, people are finding financial advice on ChatGPT. What is the world that we're living in right now? But the way that you phrased your response was interesting, because you phrased it the way that people might phrase a question, like find the best credit card for me, as someone who travels a lot or as someone who does XYZ, right? So I think the way that people interact with LLMs now is so much more conversational. And so you feel like you can give it your own personal parameters and likes and dislikes, and that it's going to try to take that into account with what it returns to you. Whereas traditional search is just like best credit card, and they're going to give you a list that has nothing to do with your own like personal spending qualities or attributes. So when you think through it, it makes sense that people would turn to something like chat more and more for financial advice, because it feels personal, even if they're still just at the end of the day doing the same thing a search engine is doing and going out there and finding articles that tell you the truth. And so it's really interesting also that now and more these models will cite their sources and link you to the articles that they are using. So I'm sure that I don't remember that always being the case. Like, I don't think a couple of years ago it was so good at doing that. It just kind of gave you whatever potentially hallucinated answer it had, and you researched it yourself. So I wonder if some of that citation practice that all of these models are using a lot more now helped with your research. And so can you just go a little bit more into the methodology and what you were actually looking at in terms of, was it the results that were returned and then you're backtracking to figure out, oh, that came from Bankrate or that came from another affiliate site? How did all that work?
Yeah. So we wanted to look at, the likelihood that the prompt responses and who was showing up in the responses was being influenced by whether or not they were mentioned or had relationships with these third-party publishers. And one of the biggest findings was, ChatGPT is a platform and Perplexity. Those two platforms heavily rely on third-party cited content. And the responses that were showing up often had those reference points to publishers like Forbes, Fortune, Bankrate, NerdWallet, the typical suspects that you would have. And we were curious to know, is where an FI showed up, if you ask for a list of kind of top recommended high yield savings products, did it matter based on where they were mentioned or if they were mentioned in these publisher sites? And the answer was actually yes. Whereas on Gemini, it was heavily more so dependent on financial institutions. So Gemini will scrape information directly from an FI's website and surface information about different products. And so the bigger FIs were the ones that tended to show up because they had high Google rankings and visibility. Whereas ChatGPT and Perplexity, like 60% plus of the AI responses were coming from and cited from publisher sources, which validated our hypothesis that, part of the benefit of being mentioned in these affiliate sites, aside from, there's still a level of trust, I think, consumers are juggling. People do their research, and to your point, there's still elements of hallucination that can happen in these LLMs. So having these sources, it's a great way for them to be able to validate and say, hey, there's real people that's done this research and this has come from a credible source. And so I think, looking at the role affiliates play, people are still going to these affiliate sites as destinations to continue their research and further validate what they've discovered. But I think we're going to see more and more as they hone and really sharpen what's getting surfaced in the responses. We talk about a no-click world. There will be a case where, if you're not showing up in the response, there's a very low likelihood then that someone's going to recognize you as a viable option and then want to open another window in a browser and go click through directly to check out your products. So I think that's where affiliates will play a heavy role in your visibility in the LLMs, which is becoming more and more important. Google search results are down quarter over quarter. They're really doing what they can to kind of, through their own AI engines, provide greater value from a search standpoint, but they're having a hard time competing. And so with that in mind, that becomes a critical part. A lot of our clients are asking us like, hey, how do we own the space? What can we do? What should be part of our strategy? And we keep saying affiliates are an important part of that strategy. Maybe if you hadn't looked at them as a direct acquisition play, where can you build strategic relationships from a content standpoint that helps you own maybe a particular niche or get really specific about a particular segment or target audience that you feel like you can win, and where you can align with the publishers to help boost and amplify likelihood that you're going to show up when someone's searching for something on chat.
It's interesting that different models are using primarily different sources. So what I heard you say is, which ones are the two that use more affiliate versus the ones that use more direct website?
Perplexity and Chat heavily rely on third-party sites like affiliates and publishers. Gemini, direct from the FI website more often than not.
Interesting. Because that, you would think that would be so much harder from a model standpoint to be scraping thousands of bank websites potentially versus going to the aggregators, which is what these other models seem to be doing. So, no takeaway there from bankers. People are going to use whichever LLM they're going to use. But I guess the takeaway is that even if you have a great web presence and are turning up as high on, let's say, Google results, that doesn't guarantee that in some of these other models where they're more reliant on articles and listicles and things like that, even if you've got great search, it's not going to help you in these LLMs that do rely more on affiliate based content.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. It's been really interesting. We did and we have we're working with a partner called Profound, who's a big platform in this space, and we had their head of marketing speak at a conference in Toronto in October. Now I'm losing track of what month we're in. But long story short, he was giving tips. People in the audience were like, okay, as a publisher, what should I think about? As an FI, what should we be thinking about? And it's interesting. There's right now very specific nuggets. It's like everyone wanted to try and figure out how to win the Google game. And, whenever they do an update to their algorithm, it was like chaos until you could figure out and pivot and then right the ship on what you needed to change to regain your visibility and your rankings. In the LLMs, it's very similar. And he was giving advice saying, comparisons are doing really well. So you'll see a lot of fintechs doing a direct, fintech to fintech comparison. So you'll see like Ramp comparing itself directly to Brex on their website as a product v product. And so that type of content does really well. Looking at pages that are really, really specific. We talked about how an individual, and he used the example of a mattress. It really stuck with me. But when someone used to search for a mattress, to your point on Google, they'd look for like side sleeper firm mattress. And that would be the search. Now it's 200-pound man that has trouble breathing, sleeps on my side, lives in a humid climate, get
yes.
really specific.
Yes.
And that's what people want, answers for their specific needs. And the behavior is very conversational, to your point. So, I mean, in banking, it's very similar. You're going to get people who have a specific lifestyle or need. And I think it'll be interesting, bank marketers can play around with it and see, what can they learn or glean from their high value customers, and would they be likely searching for? And then how do you curate highly specialized content, even on your own website, that speaks to that? I don't know that bankers are going to do product comparisons against competitors, but some of them do, especially in the card space. So anyway, like food for thought there, but there's lots of little nuggets, I think, that, brands are investing heavily in how to experiment and how to play around so that they have their Google strategy, but they have a totally separate, GEO strategy is what we're calling it.
Sorry, a GEO?
Generative engine optimization, yes.
Okay, generative
GEO, AI engine optimization, depends who you talk to, but yeah.
GEO, you heard it here first. I love that. And to your point about content, I know that was something else that you guys found in the report, the most recent report, was that the type of content kind of matters too, whether it's a listicle or something else. Maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah. So to my earlier point, I think anything that makes the content super consumable and align with the prompt. So it starts ultimately with the prompt. Like, what prompt do you want to be surfaced for? Okay. And then make sure that the content directly matches that. So it's almost, again, going back to the panel that we had, it's, specific, like what's the best high yield savings account for somebody who's looking to X. The article that will surface will be the best savings account to search for X is this because, and if it can answer it directly. So that's the first thing is, the way you approach your, not to get into the weeds, but the way you approach your meta descriptions, your slug of your URL of the article page, the first paragraph and how it responds to the answer, all of that makes a difference to what an LLM is going to surface first. And it's determination of relevancy. But then to your point, things like listicles, numbered articles, comparison products, so articles that are comparing different things, makes it really easy because I think that's how their algorithms are built to digest information and then surface valuable responses. So those are the types of content that we see performing the best at the moment, and influencing what the responses look like.
And you all came up with 30 plus prompts to conduct this research. Is that, if an FI isn't working with you all to do all that work for them, is that kind of, I mean, it's just a lot of like, what do we want to be found for? Let's create the prompt that we think our customers might ask and then kind of reverse engineer it from there.
Yeah, I mean, there's platforms that can help you. I mentioned Profound. There's another one called Peak.ai. There's lots out there that you can Google for that specialize in, almost like if you'd use a SEMrush or a SimilarWeb for normal search engines. These are new platforms built specifically there where they can help guide you on where your competitors are showing up and help to surface what some of these prompts might be. But it is a bit of like reverse engineering what you know of your audience, what you think that they'll likely be searching for. We're doing it for our own business and experimenting, and some things work really well. And some things, we've tested and haven't worked well. And that, what I mean by that is we've shown up in the responses, but the quality we're seeing isn't quite what we want. So then you kind of pivot and you figure out, okay, let's shift the focus, make it a little bit more specific, or let's refine it to try and target this type of segment. But it's a little bit of trial and error, and it's a little bit of, because you know your business best. At the same time, there are solutions out there that can be really helpful.
Okay, cool. Appreciate the shout out on those. And of course, if banks want to just kind of get all of the help, they can reach
Yeah.
out to you all at Fintel Connect. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this new research. We always appreciate an update, Alana. So let everyone know where they can find you, like always.
Sure. I mean, reach out, LinkedIn, you can find me, email Alana at fintelconnect.com or on our website, fintelconnect.com. Super easy.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.